Good afternoon, cuties, and welcome to Cutie Connect Cafe, where we tell stories about everything queer and tech. I hope you're all doing well and enjoying the weather if you are in Montreal, or hopefully it's nice and beautiful as here, anywhere you joined us. I'm Naufel, your co-founder at Queer Tech and your host. Queer Tech is based in Tehuantepec, Montreal, and we would like to begin by acknowledging that Queer Tech is located on the unceded indigenous land. The Kanya Kenahe Nation is recognized as the custodian of the lands and the water on which we gather today. As usual, I want to thank our partners, QT annual partners, Sage, Unity Technologies, Ubisoft, BandHacks, PaySafe, and Local Logic. Thank you for your support. As you know, we recently launched our job board. So if for those who are looking to join tech or advance their career at tech, or if you know anyone who's looking for a job in tech, you can refer them to queertech.org/jobs. We have few thousand listings of jobs in there. So go check it out and let us know what you think. For those who love what we do and love to support us, you can donate on our website, queertech.org. Thank you so much for those who continue to support us and donate money to Queer Tech. These contributions help us keep the organization going. So as you know, before we get started with our guest today, for those who have any questions or comments throughout the duration of our live stream, you can write your question or your comment on the comment box in the social media outlet that you are watching us on. You can also tag anyone who is looking for a job in tech or looking to advance their career in tech or just looking for some inspiration or motivation. Please beware that we might be showing your comments or question on this live stream. So really excited today. Our guest is Marlon Thompson. Marlon is an angel investor. We're going to learn what that means for those who are not familiar with the term, startup founder and experienced advocate for diversity in business. He has developed and led diversity initiatives that support founders and investors for the likes of Hootsuite Media and Highline Beta. He also served on advisory council for diversity at Lululemon. Thompson founded Future Capital in 2020 to change the landscape of startup investing across North America. Welcome, Marlon, to the show. You may reveal yourself now.
Hello.
That's quite the welcome. I love that.
It is. I feel like that's probably the only time I'll ever have paparazzi sounds around my name.
Yeah, welcome to QT Connect Cafe, and you're based in Vancouver. Good morning to you. Good afternoon, Jess.
Good morning.
How are you? How are things in Vancouver?
I'm good. Yeah, it's we're finally kind of seeing the beginnings of spring, which is nice after the winters out west can be really long and wet. So yeah, it's good. I'm good this morning. Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I love kind of getting started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what are your pronouns?
Yeah, sure. My pronouns are he/him, and based out of Vancouver, originally from Ontario. And yeah, I've been here actually almost 8 years to the date. So Vancouver is home for sure.
And you, Ontario, were you born in Toronto, outside of Toronto? Where did your life begin and why did you move to Vancouver?
Yeah, so I was born in Scarborough and spent the first few years of my life in Scarborough, then moved out to the Durham region, just east of the city. Mm-hmm. Grew up there, and then I ended up in, I've lived in a few different kind of random locations for work across Manitoba and Ontario, but ended up kind of really starting my career in Toronto. I was living and working downtown Toronto before I moved to Vancouver. So That's kind of the geographical history and where it kind of emanated out of. But and my background, my family is from St. Lucia and Trinidad, so that's kind of like the deeper heritage behind me.
Awesome. And where did you go to university in Toronto? What did you study?
Yeah, so I went to, at the time it was called the University of Western Ontario out in London, Ontario, and they went through like a rebrand a few years ago, which is kind of weird because now all of my paraphernalia, like Western paraphernalia, is like technically out of date, but I don't know if it makes it cooler because it's vintage. But yeah, so now like for younger folks, they would recognize Western University. That's where I went, and I studied political science and English language and literature. My original intention in university was to go into law. I was pre-law for the first 2 years, and I'm so appreciative of this. I remember it so distinctly. There was this one lecturer, this one professor who I really liked, who basically just, in front of a lecture hall, I think it would have been second year, just went through a laundry list of all the reasons why you shouldn't be a lawyer. Why you shouldn't is probably the wrong framing, but the cons, like the challenges, what makes being a lawyer hard and difficult, and the personality type that actually fits into that career path. And that really was eye-opening for me, and I realized that I wanted to be in a much more kind of creative, social environment in my career. So I kind of took a left turn, finished my undergrad, and went into business.
Wow. Amazing. And so after your business school, how did you end up in tech?
It's a longer story. I mean, when as it usually probably is. So when I graduated from university, my kind of default, I really loved politics and government, and my studies really started to lean into that direction in public administration, which is kind of like the business side of government. And so I considered, doing my master's. I got into a couple of programs abroad, and actually ended up working in retail and apparel for quite some time. So that was kind of my first career, and I spent 6 years working at Abercrombie and Fitch, kind of climbed my way up the ladder, and then I spent a few years working for Ralph Lauren, and my last role there was as an HR manager in Ontario. And I actually, that experience was like directly connected me to my experience in tech. So one of my colleagues from Club Monaco had left Toronto. She came out to Vancouver and started working for this. At the time, to me, it was like a really kind of weird company, this tech company called Indochino. And I remember very clearly, she called me and she said, "Hey, I think you should move out to Vancouver and come work with me on this company." I'm like, "What is this company? I've never heard of it before. I don't really understand how technology and apparel overlap, and I had really no background in technology. I was always working in very tactile kind of social industries. So I took a huge leap of faith with her and with that opportunity, and then ended up moving to Vancouver, like I said, 8 years ago in 2013, to work for Indochino. And I could talk forever about that experience, but it was super eye-opening, seeing how these startups and tech companies operate, and how creative every role really gets to be because you're building something. How much like the rapid fire learning that happened in that experience was so addictive to me, and just worked really well with my personality. I kind of never looked back. The company at the time I think they had just finished their Series A round of financing, so which means they had some money, and we were able to build a team. So it was a kind of the perfect entrance into tech, because it wasn't that kind of like in the garage, no one's getting paid, everyone's figuring it out. Like, we had some money, we had an idea, we had a customer base, and we just got to really play around and do some really cool things.
That's really great. So you studied literature, political science, then you did business school. Then out of business school, you worked in retail, and then you moved to like retail and tech. And
Yeah.
as I like to kind of summarize, and so it helped. So it's an interesting. So there's a lot of people that also LGBTQ that I talk to our community that works in retails, and a lot of times they are thinking, well, how can I get to tech? And sorry, there's a massive construction. You probably hear the truck. There's nothing I can do.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So you worked in retail. You moved to this company. Talk us a little bit through some of that thought process. You had a friend that encouraged you. Was there? Were you, nervous moving into tech? Did you feel like you fit in? Were you worried about how that would be? A lot of people who are not exposed to tech sometimes don't understand what that means, right? Comparing to us who are kind of immersed in it.
So just one clarification. I didn't go to business school. I went into business, and the reason I frame it that way is because before I started working in like really just in business, I really had ambitions of working in the public sector, right? So like working in either government or public administration. So that's why I frame it that way. But I think it's a really good question. How did I think about my entrance into technology? To be honest, like it wasn't really hyper conscious. I saw an opportunity, and I think this is probably the carrot for a lot of folks who get involved in technology. Is for me, like at the time, I was really interested in building my career, gaining roles that had more responsibility, that were a bit more expansive, and really kind of moving forward that way. And that was really what this tech company provided me. I use this scare quotes because they are, at the time, they were a tech company. Today, they're a little bit more of a conventional retailer, and that was actually due to the success of the program that we were running. Like we said, hey, you're fully e-commerce. You win or lose a sale based off of your algorithm. Why don't we test out retail? And we found out that retail is actually a really good way for the company to make money. But all that aside, breaking into technology, I think what was really important for me at the time was just I had a genuine curiosity about how these things work, how algorithms were developed, how they were used, productized. I'm an operator for sure, and so I was really, really interested in the way these teams of developers actually worked, how they made decisions, their rhythms, their cycles. I really, really found that interesting. So that was, I think, really beneficial as I broke into technology, being a totally non-technical person. I'd say I'm still relatively tech illiterate, actually, and that's we can talk a little bit about how that works as a founder of a startup. But really understanding who I needed to partner with within the organization to cover for the areas or the skill sets, or just even honestly the language that I wasn't literate in. So it was really just curiosity that drove that kind of process of breaking into technology.
That's great. What was the role that you had at Indochine?
Okay, so I have to think about that actually. My very first role there was operations manager.
Okay.
And I was there for a couple of years, and like I said, we did really well. I remember when we came in, we made $1 million for the company in I think a span of 30 days in my first 7 months. So I got a promotion after that, and because they were super happy. And I think when I left, I was either a senior manager, but basically a director level. I was running a small team. I was reporting to the director, so a senior manager of operations. I apologize, I don't have those titles handy. It's been years.
No, it's totally normal. And so it's a great story, and that's why we wanted you to share it. A lot of people who are not in tech always think of tech as the programmer job. And
Yeah.
a lot of time we talk about that, a lot of people come from other industries into tech that don't have programming roles because there is a variety of roles. Operations is one of them. Can you talk a little bit, like what did that entail? Operations role. What did you do?
Yeah, so operations is this really nebulous kind of role or category or division in companies, because I find it typically ends up being a catch-all for the areas that like other leaders don't have expertise in. So for us, like at Indochino at the time, it was really about retail, like leadership in retail across the board. So we really led the strategy of, like from, the budgets to regionality, like where we were going. Like all things retail was captured in that operational role. So that that's important though, because it allowed me to leverage my experience and bring something into a technology company that they didn't have, right? That they saw value in, because I had spent, like forever working in retail. I really understood that industry like the back of my hand. So that was part of it, like just bringing that kind of skill set. But then I'd say the other big part of it was like project management and people management. So like I always had people reporting to me. We were always, there was always a team there. And so that was a big piece of the puzzle that I was able to leverage and add value, because to be frank, especially for tech companies at that stage where they're like Series A and they're scaling up, there's only so many individuals that one person can manage or support or lead, right? So there needs to be leadership like built into the structure of the company at a number of different levels. So that was another like way that I was able to add value in that role. And so to summarize, just it really was broken down into like expertise in retail, project management, which I think is probably important for any role in any startup. And then people management, because we had a team there that was working.
Yeah, wonderful. So how long were you at Indochino for?
I was there for just under 2 years.
Okay. And then, so this was 2014, you mentioned?
Yeah, so that would have been 2013 until like the end of 2014.
Okay. And then what other companies you worked for? What was your kind of career until today?
Yeah. So from Indochino, I mean, having moved from Toronto to Vancouver, I was kind of open. My eyes were open to this emerging startup scene in Vancouver in particular. And I had like just this really fascinating experience, this opportunity to work at KittenAce, which I really have no idea what people know or don't know about KittenAce, because they're kind of like, it's a really interesting startup story. So KittenAce was founded by Chip Wilson, who's the founder of lululemon. So yeah, incredibly successful leader. And so he started KittenAce in 2014, and I joined. I think I was the second or third person on their operations team, retail operations team. So what was so unique about that was that company was funded in a completely unconventional way, given that Chip Wilson was the founder. They had they privately funded the entire thing, and so it was a really creative experience, because we were really enabled to just kind of figure a lot of things out, and they wanted to move really quickly, and the standards were really high, and the team was incredibly talented as well. So that was my next experience, and I think that actually really helped me, like leveled me up in a lot of ways, because with Chip and actually he didn't found KittenAce, but it was family members that found the team there. They brought a bunch of folks over from lululemon that just had deep experience and really were able to operate at a really high level. So that was a bit of a game changer in terms of like my career trajectory. I think like just professionalizing a lot of the skill sets and know-how that I pulled from that kind of scrappier startup experience when we were kind of like figuring out the business model and all those things. So yeah, from there, From Kit and Ace, I went into consulting, and I worked with a couple like smaller companies here in Vancouver, and that was kind of the end. I always kind of split my career, like especially the tech and investing side of my career, into two parts. So that kind of 4-year period was, my operational period, where I was really working in businesses, understanding how startups work, how decisions are made, how those teams are structured. And then from there, I moved into what I call the ecosystem side of startups and innovation. So I'll stop there and kind of see
Awesome.
where you want to go next.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, we hear a little bit about, the Vancouver ecosystem, tech ecosystem. It sounds like it's growing, and you've been throughout the process of your career. You've been mostly in operations. It sounds that's kind of like the trajectory. So, talk to us a little bit. We like to kind of go back and look at some of the pivotal moments or life moments that impacted your life, and talking about your career journey. Like, how did your queer self kind of impacted this path?
Yeah, it's interesting that question came up right now, because that moment was really where that started to shift for me. So I actually was not out for the majority of my career, up until actually around the time that I left Kit and Ace and started to work for myself. So I think there's probably a bunch that you could unpack from that. But that was when I really started to professionally, it's not that I really identified as anything before or after, but start to just really acknowledge who I was, and be a little bit more open about that. And then just to add, to finish kind of that trajectory I did after Kit and Ace and the consulting period, I went over to Hootsuite Media, which is a big tech company out of Vancouver, and got an incredible opportunity to run their accelerator program. And that's what led me into venture capital, but I'm sure we'll get there at some point. But to answer your question, the turning point, I think it's hard to actually pinpoint a moment to be totally frank with you, but I think it was probably tied to my level of comfort and security in the roles that I had, right? So, and that's deeply personal. I don't think that I've always been super inspired and just, in adoration of folks that are, have the confidence to just be themselves from day one, and they don't care what people think. But I think part of my, my ambition and my fears of failure kept me, in the closet professionally for longer than I probably should have been. I mean, so yeah, that's that turning point really was centered around me just feeling, okay, I belong here. I know I have the skills, I have the experience. So now it doesn't really matter so much if someone disagrees with, or has a certain point of view on how I live my life.
No, absolutely. And those are warranted fears. I mean, the surveys and then research, a lot of LGBTQ people, a lot of people don't come out at work. I mean, 53% of LGBTQ people in Canada are still not out at work. That's 1 out of 2 of us is not out, right? And it's a huge number. And it's due to these reasons, right? People are don't want to miss out on promotion opportunities or advancing their careers. Some people don't want to deal with discrimination or homophobia. So there is still a real issues out there.
Well, there are these undeniable power dynamics at play in a professional environment that I think are easy to overlook or undervalue or underestimate if you're not if you're in power, right? Or if you're not really concerned about a certain part of your identity that might actually get in the way of your success, right? And I am a firm believer that it is, important to compartmentalize, maybe some parts of your work and some parts of your life, but your livelihood is tied to what you do. So for a lot of us, so I think it's, you can't really underestimate how important it is to, protect yourself and understand those power dynamics. And I think broadly speaking, like you said, like queer people do understand that and act accordingly. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And so throughout these careers, you did consulting and you worked at Hootsuite and kind of get to that piece. You were also very involved in diversity and inclusion. Was that after you kind of start to come out? Was that separate from it? How did you D&I? Why did you get into it?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I think D&I is obviously such a big topic, and I have so many thoughts on the topic that I'll try to stay really focused here. Me beginning my work in diversity and inclusion actually was just kind of coincidental. It wasn't ever part of my career plan. It wasn't part of my personal goals, which I do set every year. Like it wasn't something that I said, hey, I want to give back or do this or work with this organization. And I don't know this to be true, but I would assume that that's probably the case for a lot of people, marginalized people who end up in D&I work, because what actually happened is once I started to, have some success, these groups wanted my help, right? So it was less a matter of me being proactive and going out and finding opportunities, and more of me like being, like someone that had access to certain networks or had some experience there, or like knowledge that I could share with other people. And my response has always been yes. So anytime an organization is asked for help, or anything at all, like even something like this, I think there's so much value in connecting with communities and like sharing your story, and that's clearly something that you value as well, because I think that's actually probably one of the only ways that we can learn how to navigate these systems is from one another, right? And the other piece to that puzzle is the role that I had at Hootsuite. So I wasn't actually an employee of Hootsuite. I was actually in their accelerator, which was structured as a nonprofit. And so we did diversity inclusion in a different way. Like we focused on youth specifically and creating inroads and pathways for young people to break into entrepreneurship. So that was like, it's kind of like diversity light, because we weren't really focused on metrics that most D&I leaders would point to. It was really more about fueling innovation from the ground up, right? Like working with people at like the college level, high school level, and really showing them, what innovation actually is, what entrepreneurship can do for you, what, even if you don't decide to go down the path of being an entrepreneur, what that skill set and like that way of thinking can actually do for you, right? So that was kind of like, that was the beginning of my, more charitable work and working with organizations that were focused on these communities. And like I said, I could actually probably talk about this for 2 hours, so I'll stop myself.
Thank you. It's really rich experience in sharing these perspectives is why you're here. So thank you.
Of course.
Something that D&I as a career path is fairly new also, right? Like in the last years, we start to hear more and more. And few folks from our community will reach out to me and be like, hey, like, I want to get into tech. I'm interested in D&I. And what, in your opinion, what are some of are there specific competencies and skills that someone needs to have to be a D&I manager at a tech company? And what does a D&I manager do at a company?
So disclaimer: I've never been a D&I manager, but I have worked with many.
Yeah.
And as you like, I'm on the diversity council for Lululemon here in Vancouver as well. So I definitely have had a lot of exposure to it. I'd say there are a couple different ways to approach it, from a careers perspective, from a corporate perspective, and my somewhat jaded perspective on diversity inclusion comes from actually my experience working at Abercrombie & Fitch. My experience was fine, but at the time, the company, and this is like public knowledge, had actually been through a class action lawsuit about that, like a lack of diversity in their campaigns and their staff. And it was pretty. I think most people know about that.
Yeah.
And so, I think to answer that question, like there's the one way to actually enter and break into D&I, or the one way to think about diversity and inclusion as from a competencies perspective is just the legal kind of understanding of what matters. And so basically that means we're trying not to get sued, and that's one way of approaching D&I, and it's a way that a lot of companies actually think about it. So, and I won't comment on, which ways I like or don't like, but that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is actually cultivating, the, essence and cultures and ways of thinking of different communities within your organization. I think that's probably a harder way to do it, but that's another way of doing it. And from that perspective, I think it really depends on the industry in terms of like the competencies, because like if you are looking at fashion apparel brand, diversity inclusion is going to mean something pretty different from like a legal AI company, because there are totally different implications if you don't have a diverse team or you don't have consideration for diversity in both of those scenarios. So I think that it can be pretty nebulous. I think broadly speaking, high emotional EQ or emotional intelligence, understanding people. So I think there's like a link to HR professionals that like blends really well within the diversity and inclusion space. And the last thing I'll say is that I think it's actually pretty creative kind of space to work within. So having a sense of like, what brands need to do to communicate a certain message. Like I think there's a blend between brand and diversity and inclusion and communications as well.
No,
so everything basically.
A lot of times there is also like some people, maybe they need some higher end skills because they are from the communities, the community skills. But definitely also another career that a lot of folks can consider in these tech companies. So always.
I think.
Go ahead. And
I think if you come from if you are a representative of a community, or you come from a background that allows you to inform the way a company is thinking about something, I think you are therefore like qualified to make a case for yourself at the very least. So I think there's some. I think it's a slippery slope, because there is a real tokenism issue like within corporations in particular. So it's not just about being like part of an underrepresented group, but that is a good starting point. I think it's a really good starting point if you want to work in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. So, time always runs away from us. And so there's a lot we want to talk about. So I want to talk about your VC life, your investment. So you moved from one part of working at a tech company to the part where you fund tech companies. Talk to us about how did you make that shift from the VC world? Why? And then how did you come about starting Future Capital?
So my trajectory into venture capital was pretty unlikely. I always describe it that way because it was unlikely to me. I don't have the things that a lot of folks that succeed in venture capital or even just get started in venture capital have. And those things are often, an MBA, years of experience at one of the big consulting firms like PwC, Accenture, Bain & Co, KPMG, that kind of experience, or some sort of a financial background, right? Like coming like the bankers oftentimes will, transition into VC. They want to do something that's a little bit more fun. But my trajectory was really, ironically, through kind of diversity and inclusion work. So I had worked at the accelerator at Hootsuite for 3 years, and that equipped me with a network of folks and a list of people who were working in the ecosystem. So investors, accelerator managers, founders, and that was really of value to a venture capital firm. But I also had, like I said, a unique perspective on how to actually operationalize diversity and inclusion in an organization. And again, similar to my start in tech, my start in VC was really fueled by curiosity. I really found it interesting, the mechanisms for funding for companies. I found the structures, everything about it I found really interesting. And probably one of the biggest motivations for me was through my career in tech, the more experience, the kind of higher up and more kind of insight and access I had to information about how decisions were made, the clearer it became to me that venture capitalists and angel investors were this really small group of people that made a lot of the most important decisions in venture. And so that was kind of the thing that really kind of the light bulb moment was like, oh, well, if I really want to see some change in this industry, that's probably where to go. And that's kind of how I broke into it. And I started out, working as a director for a VC firm that's based out of Toronto. I was still working in their Vancouver office, and we were working on an initiative to help them. It was essentially part of their fundraising strategy, but it was specifically focused on creating some gender diversity within that strategy. So I won't go into the details of that because it can get kind of complex, like how those structures work, but that was my role there. And after about a year in venture capital, I saw a few things happened all at once. So I felt like my overarching journey in tech had led me to a point where I felt ready to start my own company. But there was also all of the events that followed the death of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd last summer that were kind of like a very acute impetus for me to start Future Capital, because as an individual, I believe that there needs to be some risk taken, and you need to see more people in positions of power and influence in order to see real systemic change at every level, especially at these levels where decisions are made within the economy. And so starting Future Capital was really sparked by those events. I can tell you a little bit about what Future Capital is as well, and kind of what we do differently.
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, so Future Capital, what we're really doing is reimagining the way startups are funded. And we are part of, honestly, like a chorus of new mechanisms and structures and companies and funds that are really, participating in like this inevitable decentralization of the early stage investing ecosystem. So whereas, just to put that into some more practical terms, whereas 15 years ago, as a startup founder, you can get money from venture capitalists or really rich people, aka angel investors.
Yeah.
Now there are dozens of ways that you can get funding. There's crowdfunding, there's individual investors, there's syndicates, there are venture funds, rolling funds. So we're really trying to change the way startups are funding, and the way that we're doing that, and what I think is unique about our approach is that we are really focused on creating a new, more diverse cohort of investors at every level. And so we start with education. So our product that's in the market right now is a learning product. We run a crash course on startup investing. We've moved 177 people through that course in the first 10 months. So we've been really, really busy. And, the future for us is really about developing a suite of tools and products that will really enable this cohort of investors to be successful and to be competitive in the early stage investing ecosystem.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. And definitely, I think, we're reaching a level where a lot of people in the community also want to be part of the tech community and want to invest. But a lot of people think that you need to be super rich to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And the barrier is going down more and more, and the opportunities to do that are more. And learning about how to do that is really key. And I did take your course, and it was very informative. Even someone who's been in tech for 10 years, it was really great to see the structure and think about angel investment from a different perspective that maybe I was exposed to.
Yeah, so really a simpler way of putting it is this company was started because once I understood how these things worked, I was like, oh, that is not what I really, imagined, or it didn't really match my perception of angel investors, venture capitalists. I actually the knowledge of how the industry works was so powerful for me, right? It gave me so much, to work with in terms of charting my own path into angel investing, and understanding how I could actually be involved in the ecosystem without having, millions of dollars at my disposal. What I'll say is that I would say the barriers are not necessarily going down. There are lots of folks that want those barriers to stay in place. But the mechanisms are shifting. And so with that, there are different ways to get involved. And, just the angel investor profile, I think has changed over time. And in its simplest form, it's, an individual that provides capital to an early stage high growth company. And that's typically in exchange for equity, right? So it's, hey, I have money, here you go, you need money, you're gonna give me a percentage of your company. And the goal is that we all, create value and wealth and share it together over time, right? But that is just changing over time. There's, I point to the GameStop kind of episode earlier this year as a real indicator that information is really is powerful enough to disrupt these really old, really guarded systems and structures, economic systems and economic structures that have been in place. So I think we're kind of at the beginning of a bit of a wave of newness in the early stage investing kind of scene. And a big part of that is just people understanding what it is and how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I know you do different cohorts for training people to understand investors. Can you tell us when is your next one coming up? Where can people sign up for it?
Yes, great opportunity to plug. So we are running we have two open community cohorts, and just to give a sense of how we operate. So we run private sessions with private groups. We run corporate sessions as well. But 4 times a year, we open up our cohorts to the community, so anyone can apply. And our next cohort, I'm not gonna give you the exact dates because I'll get them wrong, because I don't manage calendar. But we do have a women's only cohort in June, and then we have a community cohort that is open to the public in July. And applications are open for both of those. So if you go to our website and you go to digital learning, you can find it right there.
Wonderful. myfuturecapital.com is the website.
Yes.
As usual, we're reaching the end of our interview, and it's been very informative. And thank you so much, Marlon, for joining us and sharing your perspective with us. And if anyone want to reach out to you to learn more about angel investment or ask, what's the best way to reach you?
anyway, so yeah, you can go through Instagram if you want to do that. You can do LinkedIn. Email's fine as well. Like my email's open, so I can share that. I don't know where the best place to share that would be, but yeah, I'm happy to connect with anyone who's interested. I am definitely I get eager about talking about these things, and I'm like a lifelong student, so I'm happy to chat about this stuff anytime.
Yeah, wonderful. And you can write your email in the private chat, and we'll share it with the community.
Awesome.
As we go. So just to close here, thank you again, Marlon, for joining us today. As you know, I like to share a little bit some of the things we learned from you, and definitely it sounds like curiosity is something that drives you since the beginning of your career, moving from retail into tech and doing ops and getting into VC world. And definitely I think people underestimate how to follow their curiosity, and I think that has a huge impact. I think also something you said that marked me is be part of the change, right? If you don't like something, you don't always have to just fight it. You can be part of the system and change the system from the inside. Something I deeply believe also, and I know it might be easy to just fight it, but sometimes it is worth to get into the system and understand it and impact it, and I think that's just a valuable advice. So thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Yeah, I love the way you frame that, and yeah, this has been really fun. I appreciate you thinking of me, and yeah, it's really great to be here.
Doing good. And before we let you go, I just want to remind everyone to thank you again for our QT annual partners: Sage, Unity Technologies, Ubisoft, VanHack, SpaceSafe, and Local Logic. I hope you enjoyed our episode today. Our goal is to tell more and more queer stories in tech through this live stream or through other outlet. We do have also blog posts that we post from some of these videos, so you can also check them out on our website. And if you like what we do, you can donate to Queer Tech so we can continue to share stories and tell stories about queer people in tech. We also look for recommendations. So if you have anyone in your company or someone you know that you would like to recommend for the show, you can email me or find it on our website at queertech.org/QTConnect Café. And our next episode will be on June 3rd at noon. I hope you will be able to join us. Mark your calendars, and we will be letting you know our guest speaker soon once it's confirmed. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Marlon, thank you for taking the time this morning and sharing your story with us.
Thanks, Nafal.